Okay, so this is a trial application for wheel sets, or the management of wheel sets. And I've got two browsers open at the moment. Into this browser, I'm going to log in as a Siemens operative. So if I click on the sign in button there, in fact, this guy is a crash test dummy, that's what the CTD means. Oops, he won't get in unless he's got a password. So as soon as we sign in, we see a little bit more of the site. And in fact, what we can see here is we've got a Siemens tab here for all the work that we do for Siemens. And this is their launch page for their wraps. And this is called WOWIP, and it's work set overhaul work in progress. And it covers all this work described here, but clearly we have to manage wheel sets to keep railway vehicles safe. So I'm going to click on this button here and go to the wheelset overhaul, and this should open up a report for me. And in this report there's all the wheelset numbers down here, all the overhaul numbers, because if they've been overhauled once, then that overhaul number's 1. If they get overhauled twice, then that'll go to number 2. I'm just trying to see an example of that there, can't find one at the moment. If I maybe filter on this one here, 2, press enter, I'll see how many we've got that have been overhauled twice. So there's a few here that have been overhauled twice. So I take that off. So that's our filtering system as well, so it's quite useful to be able to find things.
So that's all the information that will be required to work on that unit in the one place? That's
right. So this is pulling together information about that unit. So there's something here, the stock code, so that's the type of wheelset it is, which depot has sent the wheelset for overhaul, and this is when the overhauler has received it in, and he gets given a target date, and then there's a dispatch date here. So they've got different statuses. So this one's been returned, this one's been put in quarantine, this one has been dispatched. And in fact we get a nice little view of all this data in the chart. So if we have a quick look at the chart to show how we manage data, what we should get now is a nice little Gantt chart here. So in fact it works, we can still use the filters. So if I want to say look at things that have been done in Manchester, if I type man in there and press enter, it will filter out for me all those wheel sets going to Manchester. And in fact what it's presenting here is these are the wheel set numbers down here, and this is a date. So the dot here is the in date for the overhaul supplier, and then we have a target date, and we have a dispatch date. So in fact maybe if we zoom in on these ones here, what we can see here is that this particular wheel set arrived on this date. The target for dispatch is then, and they've delivered ahead of schedule. In fact that one's ahead of schedule as well, and these ones are slightly behind schedule. So we get a good idea of where our wheel sets are.
Good snapshot.
Yeah, it's a good snapshot of where we are, and we can search any of this data at any time. We've also got the concept of live and frozen data. So live data is stuff that's happening now, so it's stuff that we've dispatched and is with the overhaul supplier, and frozen are things that have happened in the past. So at the moment I'm showing both, so let's leave that there. There's a second report that we get to from the Siemens tab, and that's if we want to look at wheelset components. So this is another report on the same basic wrap. And what it's going to pull for us is all the wheel sets, all the serial numbers of bearings, and all the serial numbers for wheels. So a wheel, there's 2 wheels per wheel set, of course, and there's 2 bearings per wheel set. So if I wanted to look, maybe this might be interesting. So this is a casting number here, the first part of that number. So if I type that into my filter here, or maybe I'll type that one because it's easier for me to see. So I'm going to go type in E170 0540. Now that's going to filter for me every time that cast number is being used. So if I just press enter, then I can see that all these wheels have been made from this cast number. So if a defect was found in the wheel, and it gave rise to some incident on the railway, it would be very easy for us to pull all the other wheels that have been made from the same casting in case we need to go off and do some inspection work on those.
Right.
So this gives Siemens the program management tool and also the kind of search tools to find out where their wheel sets are. But at this point we haven't actually seen how we go through the process. So I'm going to start the process with this button here. We're going to create a new wrap instance of our wheel overhaul work in progress. So there's the wheel overhaul work in progress. I'm going to create a new wrap instance now, and I'm going to pretend that I'm sending one off. So if I call this test 3, now at this point it's saying there's some red letters here that says enter the wheel set number and then hit the submit button to create the wrap instance. Now that's because that's a star there, and if test has been done once already, then the last time would be 1 and the automatic numbering would give this number 2. Now I think this is the first time we've had test 3 through, so if I just submit that to the database, it's going to check that for me. And you might have just seen there that it's actually given it the number 1. It's the first time we've been through here.
So there's a unique way of sorting each wrap from the rest of the field.
The chances are this will go through the overhaul process again in maybe a few years' time, or less than a few years' time, depending upon the condition of the wheel set. So, but we keep track of how many times it's been through. The next thing is to pick out the stock code. So what type of wheel set are we dealing with? And this is selected from this drop down here. And these are all the wheel sets that we're dealing with currently on all the Siemens different types of train. So let's click on this one here. Now if I want to know a little bit more about that, what I can do is if I just open this in a new tab, so open this in a new tab, in a separate wrap, I've collected some information about this particular stock code, and it's telling me that this is the overhaul spec for the wheel set, and it should take 7 days, and there's no gearbox, so there's no gearbox overhaul spec, and if there was planned days for the gearbox, it's likely to take longer if you're doing both the wheel set and the gearbox were being sent for overhaul. So that's just in the background there, and this is how we manage that list that has populated this thing here. So this is what we call a wrap link list, in fact, but that's a bit of detail. If I hover over this thing here, it gives me a little note, and there's a number goes in here, so a wheel set claim number. Now I'm going to go out and have to just copy this number, because these are numbers that Siemens issue. So I'm going to just copy and pop it into there, and the number tells me what depot it's come from. So that's been calculated for me. So if we get this number right, then we're going to know where we're going to send the wheel set back to. So so an order number, if I just throw some numbers in there, and in fact it's not letting me go at that. This little cross tells me whether that's acceptable or not, and if I hover over there, it's saying actually I need 10 digits in there. So so if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe it'll accept that, and yeah, we've got a tick now. So is this a standard overhaul? Yes, it is. Any special requirements? None. Whoops, I'll just get rid of that. None. And maybe what else I should show is this is the point at which we sign, but let's just get a bit of information wrong. So I'll just delete that 8 there. Now you can see how that signature box is now not operative, and it's not operative because the conditions for sign off are not satisfied. So I'm going to pop the final number in. It's now satisfied. Pop it into there. I'm going to go crash test dummy signature. So I need to supply a password to get a signature from any user, and in there it's telling me that the crash test dummy has signed it on that date. Now this is the creation process, and that's all that we're worried about if we're a Siemens user, because the rest of the work is going to be done by the wheel overhaul supplier. So, and in fact, the only thing I'm going to acknowledge is when we've got it back in Siemens. So that's the kind of process that we're going through. And in fact, I couldn't, even if I wanted to, I couldn't make any changes in here. It's saying I can't sign because it's, to me, this is a read-only control. But let's see what happens now when we log into a second browser. And this time I'm going to log in as a crash test dummy. But as a crash test dummy supplier. Okay, so this is, and I've got a password. Now they get to see pretty much the same thing when they log in. So they've got a Siemens tab, which is exactly the same as the Siemens tab. But we've also got an in tray. Now this is an interesting function. I can see from here that this is waiting for a supplier to sign to say that the goods have arrived. So I'm going to use this in tray function, and if I go to in tray there, it says show me anything that's awaiting my signature. Well, there's an instance called WOWIP, which is this thing of course, and there's one instance that requires my signature. So if I click into here, then it's telling me that test 3 is open for me. So if I click into there, I see the same information that has been entered by Siemens. I can't change that, of course. I can try, but it won't help me. See, I've jumped back there for some reason. If I go back into there, probably. But I can't change these controls because I'm obviously not allowed to. But I can change things in here. So first thing I need to do is give it an RMA number. So I think that's something that looks like that. Hopefully I get a tick, and then I can sign it off. So I'm going to sign it off now as the supplier. So again, I need to put in my password, and there's my signature. I hover over the signature, it tells me exactly the time at which I've signed that thing off now, and I can carry on with the process of overhaul. The first process is somebody has to inspect it, and this might not happen as the same day as it's received, so we've got a little date thing here, a little date drop down. So let's say that's happening today anyway. What was it like? Well, let's say it's okay. Wheel cast number. If I just hover over there, it's telling me that this is a stamp on the non-gear end, and it needs to start with the letter E. So I'm going to put in E and some numbers. That gives me a tick. Wheelset number is 55. Bearing number is something else. Then we've got the second wheel. That's another number starting with E. And then we go 77, and we put the bearing number in there of that, and this is now confirmation of whether we think, as now we've inspected this wheel set, whether we agree with Siemens if it's a standard overhaul. So yes, we do actually agree, and if we had any points of difference, we might want to raise them here, and so we can send this straight to production. If we had any problem with it, then we might send it to quarantine because we might have to talk about it with the client. So I'll send it to production, and I'm going to sign off this process now. Again, this requires a signature with anybody with the role supplier. That's what it's asking for there. And in fact, once I've done that, I can't now edit this. I wouldn't be allowed to delete that, or I can't edit that because this has locked down the information on this page. So this is how we build up the process. Now when the overhaul work has been done, then it goes out with various, it might come out with a new axle or it might not. So I'm going to say that it was not applicable in this case. So there we go, that's okay. We might do some ultrasonic inspection, in which case I might have a report number. So let's do a report. So that's just a field. And we may have also re-wheeled the wheel set. So there might be a different casting number and a different bearing number. And let's just pop this information in the best we can. And I'll put some number in there. This is a Lucchini part number, I believe. Now we're going on to the disc brakes. So we're going to look at the disc brakes, and we can do a few things with the disc brakes. We can actually we can fit new ones, or we can skim the existing ones, or we can reuse them. Let's say we're going to use new ones, and new ones are 7mm thick. But they may not necessarily be in that condition. If we chose to skim them, there could be different thicknesses. And the final thing I need to do to activate this signature is to put some information in here. And there we go. I'm now okay. I can supply this off now. So password required for any signature as normal. And let's just leave that process there. But obviously what happens now is some of this information now, there's additional information required in case we might have done some extra work, and that's just going to be associated with the billing. Finally, we'll come to a dispatch time. So the target date, if you remember, the target date for that wheel set was 7 days. So in fact that's been automatically calculated from the time it's been received. So we've taken this time here and we've added our 7 days to it, and we've accounted for weekends and holidays as well. So that's the date we're expecting to dispatch this. And when it gets dispatched, we will be asked to sign it. And a little bit like the inbox for the supplier, once that's been dispatched, that will activate this signature here, which is the trigger for the Siemens guy to say, yes, we've got it back at the depot and the process is complete. And that's how we manage the process, and we do it by kind of sharing the same form across 2 different sites. So thanks for listening.